Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. If you haven't already done so, please make sure the volume of this podcast is set perfectly to your listening enjoyment. Please take your seat, whether that's on the treadmill, car, sofa, or bed, and buckle in for the last trip. My name is Jamie Beebe, and I'll be your tour guide, recreating someone's last days in paradise. On behalf of myself and everyone behind the scenes, please enjoy the Last Trip podcast. And because nobody likes a long flight to get to where they want to be, let's prepare for takeoff. Today on The Last Trip, we're diving into the darker side of travel with someone who knows exactly where the bodies are buried, literally and figuratively. DM Barclay is an award-winning travel journalist with a knack for uncovering the truth behind paradise. You might know her from her groundbreaking guide, Traveling Different, which helps neurodiverse families navigate the chaos of vacationing with grace and strategy. But under the name DM Barr, she's also a thriller writer who crafts suspense like a seasoned detective. And now, she is fusing those worlds together in her series, Vacations Can Be Murder, a true crime lover's travel guide, a multi-volume passport to the most chilling destinations across the globe. She's part Nancy Drew, part Rick Steves, and she's here with us to share the stories, the secrets, and maybe even a few travel warnings you won't find in the brochures. So buckle up. We're going on a trip where the souvenirs come with stories you'll never forget. Dawn, welcome to The Last Trip. We're so happy to have you here.
Well, thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be part of a podcast that kind of combines the vacation and the murder, even though we do it in different ways.
I really think that our listeners are going to love what you're doing, and bringing this to them is going to be really fun. So let's dive in. You've been a travel journalist for a long time, but now you're diving into the true crime side of things. I got to ask you the question that I get all the time, which is, what made you decide to blend travel with true crime? What was that moment where that clicked for you?
Well, I've been writing psychological thrillers and romantic suspense for quite a while, and I'd also been a travel journalist for a very long time. And I was at a conference in Minneapolis called VoucherCon, which is the World Mystery Convention. It's for fans and it's for writers. And I went on a true crime tour of Minneapolis and St. Paul, and I thought it was pretty interesting. And I wondered to myself, I wonder if anybody has written a book that combines or lists all the true crime tours around the world, around the country, and nobody had. And so that was the seed of the idea, because if no one's done it, and I think it's a good idea, then someone should, and I think it should be me. So that was the seed of the idea, and it grew from there.
I love that. That's kind of how, in a way, how I started too, because I was like, I love true crime and I love travel. How do I work that together? And I realized when I was traveling all the time, I would look up the crimes in the area, who went missing, who got murdered. And I'm like, well, I can't be the only one doing this. That's kind of how it started for me too. So very similar.
I think there are probably a lot of people who, when they travel, they might actually travel because of the crimes and they want to be a part of it. They want to see where it happened and feel closer to it and scope out the area, and sort of wrote it for those people, as well as people who are tombstone travelers and love going to cemeteries and seeing where people were buried, people who want to travel and see where the jails are and the people who are incarcerated there. And also people who are interested in the paranormal, since I list ghost tours and haunted restaurants and hotels too.
I love ghost tours. I do ghost tours all the time. All the time. Those are so fun. And the paranormal, everything you're saying, I'm right on the same page with you. And the first book in your series is A True Crime Lover's Travel Guide to New England, which is a rich, moody region. Love New England. I'm curious, why start there? Was it the history, the vibe, the cases, something else?
It's a matter of being really anal and wanting to do things in order. And I figured I would start at the top right of the country and move down, and then start going to the Midwest and move down and then get to the West. So the next book is Mid-Atlantic states, New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. That's coming out in August. And after that, in February, we should have the Capital Region. And then probably next September would be the South.
Oh, wow. So you're going to hit the whole US.
Yeah.
What about other countries?
Well, let's see where the contracts go. It depends if I'm contracted to write those or if I decide to self-publish those. This is going to be a 4-year project as it is doing the States. So let me see how I feel at the end of 4 years.
I'm sure it's so much research. So
Yeah,
much.
it is. And I say 10 books, but quite honestly, I've got the feeling that when I get to Texas, that might be its own book. Florida might be its own book. I've grouped together states that I think are going to work out together. But then when I started doing Mid-Atlantic, that was supposed to include 6 states. And New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania had so much crime, I had to throw those states to the capital region. So you never know until you start writing it.
Or something like Alaska, where they've got a lot of paranormal things and crazy ghost things happening there.
Yeah. Right now, I think I have Pacific Northwest combined with Alaska, but that may change too. I know that California will be its own book.
There's a lot going on in California.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm here. I see it all the time. There's a lot happening here.
Yeah.
When you were digging into the cases for New England, was there anything that really surprised you? Anything that stuck with you? Any cool things you can give us a teaser about?
Well, I was surprised. I mean, I went to school in Connecticut for boarding school, and I went to college in Massachusetts, and I was totally ignorant of all the things that had happened there. And I was quite surprised just how much crime occurred in Massachusetts. It is significantly larger chapter than the rest of the book. Though there was a lot of mob violence in Rhode Island, also a lot of child abuse in Rhode Island that really saddened me. I can really be dispassionate about most of the crimes and separate myself and look at it as history and not feel anything. But when children or animals are involved, I get very, very upset. But that surprised me. There's a lot more in New Hampshire than I thought there would be, because New Hampshire's always struck me as a very quiet little state. Vermont didn't surprise me because Vermont was quiet, and a lot of cold cases in Vermont. But I do think that each state has its own personality. And that was even true in Pennsylvania, a lot of mass shootings and a lot of anti-Semitism, which surprised me since it's a Quaker state. So yeah, I do find that they do have different personalities.
That's interesting. Is there any state where you're like, oh, I learned too much. I'm not going there?
Well, I live in New York, and that's where I really encountered the grittiest parts. I mean, there was cannibalism. 2 different people were cannibals, and there was a woman who ran an infantorium where people would come to bring their children for short periods to longer periods of time. And 53 of those children ended up being killed. Neglect and sadism. And there was just some horrible stories in New York. So that was upsetting since I live here. And I found that really close to where my husband grew up, there was a place where the mob used to, chop up bodies and package them and send them away. I said, did you know that this happened like a few blocks from your house? It's a nice, quiet little area. And now it's a church. Now that particular place has been taken over. It's a church.
I wonder if there's ghost stories in that church now.
I guess so. Yeah, I found out also that, I grew up on Long Island, and I grew up pretty close to Oyster Bay. And I was surprised that there had been a serial killer tending to the arboretum there. It's like, oh, that's nice.
Wow. Were there any stories that you didn't include in the book because they just didn't sit right or felt too sensitive? I know some cases I've thought about covering, but I haven't yet because they're too fresh or too new.
I decided from the beginning that I wasn't going to include specific house addresses. I include the block number of private houses. I do not include the exact address, so I imagine it's easy enough to find if people want to. I decided up front that I was not going to cover the church-related pedophilia cases in Boston, pretty much because I didn't want people going to churches for any reason except to either pray or worship or to admire the beauty of the church. I didn't want them going to say, oh, this is where this happened. So I decided up front not to include that. The whole point of the book is where the things happened. And I give you itineraries for everything down to the block numbers, I said, for houses, or the exact address for businesses and apartment buildings where they happened. But if a crime didn't have a lot of places you could go, or really any place you could go, for example, the Preppy murders in New York City with Jennifer Levin, the big place was, she was killed in Central Park. I'm not going to put that in because, quite honestly, where in Central Park are you going to go? It's too vague. Whereas with the Boston Strangler, I had all the apartment building addresses. So, of course, that was going in. So if you didn't have a place to go, or there was only one place and it was kind of not as exciting a story as something else, I left it out.
Why do you think people are so drawn to places with dark history? Do you think it's just that proximity to danger, something deeper? And why would people want to go see this true crime place, possibly?
I'm always interested in subcultures, and I definitely believe there's a subculture of people who want to feel like they're a part of things. Why they want to go, I suppose, is the same reason why people go to concerts instead of listening to a record or watching a video of a concert. They want to be part of it. And there's an excitement, just the way that authors will go and research. They'll go to a city just to feel what the city is like before they put the city in a book. And I think that's why. I think people are drawn to true crime overall. I think part of it is the catharsis of knowing that the person got caught, as opposed to cold cases, which I didn't include a lot of if I could avoid them. And I think women like to know what's going on so they can avoid being a part of it in the future. And I do include victim resources at the end of each chapter. So if God forbid anything horrible happens to you, the reader, you know where to go for help. And a lot of it, you can't really prevent. You're walking down the street and somebody grabs you. I mean, it's not like you're never going to walk down the street. But I think it never hurts to be aware of what's going on and what people went through. There were a lot of people who were involved in drugs and they ended up being killed, or prostitution, and they ended up getting picked up and killed. So I guess the lesson there is don't take drugs or sell your body. But plenty of other people who were not guilty of anything got killed too.
I think that the awareness is key in that. A lot of times people do turn to true crime to get that awareness, like, oh, I need to be more aware when I'm walking down the street. Maybe I shouldn't be on my phone when I'm walking down the street. And a lot of times it's circumstance. There's no way to prevent a crime, but it's just that awareness where it can get you thinking, be more aware.
Yeah, I think people definitely put themselves in danger when they walk down the streets looking at their phone. For one thing, they can be run over or walk into somebody, but also New Yorkers have their hands on their purse at all times. I spent a lot of years living in the city. I'm aware when I walk down the street of who's behind me. If I'm walking down a dark alley, I'm making sure that I end up with people. I'll walk alongside somebody else if I find somebody else there. You just pick up those tips because you're living in New York City.
You have so many books coming out, this whole series, which I think is going to be awesome. Something to put on the shelf, a whole collectible thing. I used to do that with the Lonely Planet guidebooks. I love those books. I still have them all somewhere. They're probably quite out of date. Although something like this isn't going to go out of date. I can't wait to get a whole bunch of them and read them. Do you see doing a second volume and sweeping through again with newer crimes?
You mean updating the ones I've already done? Let me get through the country first before I even think about that, because these are not the only books I'm doing right now. I also write fiction. I also do crime anthologies where I edit other authors' short stories and include my own, and I've got a bunch of those coming out. So let's wait on the updated ones. And I also include crimes from back in the 16 and 1700s all the way up to the present. So it was never going to be all inclusive. In fact, I say in the introduction, I apologize because I'm so obsessive compulsive. I'm apologizing that it's not comprehensive, but it is literally impossible with crime to be totally comprehensive. I am sure I'll leave out your favorite serial killer or your favorite haunted restaurant. There were some restaurants who didn't even want to be in the book. So what can you do? I say it's a sampling. I also include lists of other books you can read if you want to learn more about the crimes that I've summarized at the beginning of each chapter. And also I will update probably in my blog. I have a Vacations Can Be Murder blog where I will find things that might have been left out of the book and include them. Or if readers want to send me stories about how they've gone on some of the itineraries or they've done their own true crime tours and include pictures, I'll be happy to interview them or publish what they've written because I'd like it to be crowdsourcing.
Oh, that's great. You said your next one is in the Mid-Atlantic. You chose the 3 states. Are there any teasers, any cool stories you can tease us with from those?
Well, Albert Fish, he's perhaps the most grisly. There's quite a bit of crime also in Poughkeepsie, and I'm going to be going on a couple of tour dates with a woman named Jody Millman, who has fictionalized a lot of the Poughkeepsie crime. And also, when I go out, I'll be with David Bushman, who has actually researched true crime in Schenectady. So we'll be speaking at Bridgeport Library in Connecticut on the 31st of May. And I hope we'll have other dates too. And so I hope to go on the road more in the fall with the New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. It's harder for me to do New England, although I can do Connecticut, because it's going all the way up, say, to Maine. People in Maine ask me to come, and unless I have a lot of stops when I'm there, it's very difficult to do.
That makes sense. Research meets reality. You're getting out there and seeing the places and moving around.
If they're 4 or 5 hour drive, I want to have a lot of places to go to. I am going to be going down to Florida next week, and we're driving, and I'm going to be stopping at haunted restaurants along the way so I can take some pictures and see if I see any ghosts and include those in the book.
Oh, that sounds fun. And is there a case tied to a vacation destination that you think more people should know about that don't? Is there something on your plate that it's always your go-to to talk about at parties? Or like, how does everyone not talk about this? That kind of story?
Well, I think that Boston has a lot going on. I went to school in Boston, but I think a lot of people go to Boston just because it's such a cool city. They may go to check out colleges. They may be going out just to have great food. They may be stopping there on their way to Cape Cod. There's a lot of crime that was in Cape Cod and a lot of crime that was in Boston. I really like the story of Charles Ponzi. I admired his tenacity because he just never stopped conning people. And you have to admire persistence.
True. Very true. Tell me a little more about him in case people don't know.
Well, do you know what a Ponzi scheme is? It's a scheme like
Yes.
Madoff had where you take money from some people to pay off other people. He, and I believe it was the 1920s, he had a scam with stamps and prepaying stamps for foreign countries. It's written better in the book than I'm going to tell you now because I'm 2 books ahead. But in any case, he probably scammed about $20 million in today's money. You can go to Lexington, Massachusetts and see the house that he built. And I tell you where to go, where he opened his securities office. And I thought it was an interesting story and probably worth reading because he's an interesting character.
I love that. Yeah, he is definitely an interesting character. And he's kind of created something that's, I guess, lasted the test of time. We still have Ponzi schemes, right?
Yeah, he's got something named after him, that's for sure. But he went to jail. He was out on bail waiting another trial and another jail sentence. And during that time, he went down to Florida and started selling land that was underwater to people. So I say, when I say he was persistent and he just never stopped, it's true.
It's a lot of tenacity for conning people.
But also in Boston, you have the Brinks job, you have Sacco and Vanzetti, you have the marathon bombings, and a lot of smaller crimes as well, and a lot of grisly crimes too in these little suburbs outside of Boston, where there are a lot of wonderful colleges. There's a lot of crime that happened as well.
Do you think the mob had a lot of the most grisly crimes?
Not necessarily. They certainly had a lot, especially in Providence, Rhode Island. And in Boston, you had Whitey Bulger. But I covered more of it in Rhode Island because there was so much more going on. There's such a diversity of crime, say, in Boston than in Rhode Island.
Before we let you go on any further, I do want to tell listeners where we can find your books, where we can stay updated on your work, what's next in the series, your blog. Give me all the lowdown, all the details.
Well, first of all, because the book's at Ingram, where libraries order from, if you go to your local library and ask them to stock it, they will most likely do it for free. And that's one way for people to read it. It's also available in both ebook and paperback. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kobo, bookshop.org, where you can patronize your local bookstore. They may not have it on the shelves, but they can order it because it's available to them. And my blog is vacationscouldbemurder.com. If you're interested in my fiction, that's DM Barr. That's D like David, M like Mary, Barr, BARR.com. And you can read all about my fiction, my anthologies as well. I'm also on social media. You can find me at author DM Barr on Instagram. You can find me on TikTok and Facebook.
And let me see the cover of that again. I love the cover. It's definitely something I would pick up.
I would imagine that in the upcoming versions or editions, the words will change on the caution tape and maybe the colors will be different, but they should all have this same look to them. And it's a thick book. It's like 438 pages. The bibliography alone is about 40 pages, about 500 entries. I spent a lot of time researching this book.
You did. There's so much research that went into it. How much research? How many hours would you say you spent on research for that book?
I will tell you, it takes me about a month to do each state. So it was 6 months of research and writing, because the writing, it's not creative writing, it's like history writing. So most of it's the research and the organization of the material. And then it takes me a month just to fact check, because there's so much work involved in fact checking it. So about 6 months per volume.
I know when I do research for a case, I get so submerged into it. Like I live in that case. So for you to live in this state for a month and then write it for another 6 months and all that, that must have just been all encompassing.
It was. And then when you're organizing the itinerary, since I break each state up into different portions, and I maybe give you 4 or 5 itineraries per state where you can cover in bringing all the different aspects of the book together. And so it'll tell you here, if you drive here and you go north to here, you can go to a crime museum, or you can go to a haunted restaurant. And while you're in town, you might want to stay at this hotel. And here's where this crime happened. Just organizing those tours, which I think are the heart of the book, because that's where you'll get the exact addresses. That was a lot of work, but it's really fun to do it too, because I'm like the kind of crazy person who loves going to thrift stores and loves cold calling, and it's sort of like a treasure hunt. Well, this was just sort of really fun to figure it out, like a puzzle to figure out the best way to route people.
I love that. It's kind of like organizing a whole vacation around it, but for other people. So you're like a travel agent.
I was a travel agent for a long time, and then I was a travel writer. So it was sort of a natural progression for me to write these books.
That does make a lot of sense. Now, finally, if someone does pick up your book, whether they are a hardcore true crime fan or just love a good off the beaten path adventure, what is the one thing that you hope everybody can take away from reading this book?
Well, I hope that if they're passionate about true crime, that they feel that they've been able to get one step closer to what they're interested in. I hope their one takeaway is, wow, I really have to go to Amazon and write a review of this book, because that's what helps authors. It's free for you to do, and it really helps our career. So that's the main takeaway. Please leave a review.
I don't think people realize how important reviews are, especially the good ones.
It's the most generous thing you can do to an author. It costs you nothing. And it helps Amazon. Well, it helps us through Amazon, because the more reviews you have, the more Amazon is promote that book to other people. And it costs you nothing. So if you like a book, not only mine, any author's book, please review it.
Before I buy anything, I think it's my older age now, but before I buy anything, I read every review. I want to know exactly what everybody else out there bought and thought of it.
Yeah. And you go to the 1-star reviews too, to see what they think. And I do that.
Always.
I'll read the worst review and I'll read the best review. And then I'll generally go by what the 3-star reviews say.
Always. And I do that especially with traveling, because that's where you find the safety issues or the issues, the problems, the real big problems. And then you get the reviews where like, it was raining the whole time I was here. I hated it. And it's a 1-star review.
Yeah, not the fault of the writer.
Exactly. Dawn, thank you so much for joining us on the last trip and for sharing your stories and your spooky travel wisdom. This was really, really fun. And I think that our listeners are going to love it and go check out your book.
Thank you very much for having me. And I hope everybody out there buys the book and enjoys it. Happy travels.
And I'll put a link to the book and your websites and everything in the show notes as well. So people can do an easy click and get.
Thank you very much.
From scenic views to sinister paths, every destination has its secrets. And thanks to Don Barclay, we now know just how many of those secrets are hiding in plain sight. Whether you're booking your next getaway or just dreaming about escape, Vacations Can Be Murder reminds us that the most beautiful places sometimes come with the darkest backstories. A huge thank you to Dawn for taking us behind the guidebook and into the shadows of travel, where true crime meets true wanderlust. You can follow her work and get updates on the Vacations Can Be Murder series at dawnbarclayinc.com or check the show notes for all the links. And hey, before you hit book now on your next trip, maybe ask yourself, was this someone else's last trip? And finally, remember to leave a review and rate this podcast 5 stars if you like the show, or hell, even if you don't. But either way, feel free to let me know what you think. Please follow The Last Trip on Instagram at The Last Trip Crime Pod, and subscribe on Patreon to support the show. You'll get extra research, videos, photos, and updates, and even learn more about my personal travels. That's patreon.com/thelasttrippodcast. I'm Jamie Beebe, bringing you your last trip and signing off until the next one. Thanks for listening.